like it's ringing. We're flames in the fire that keeps burning. We're inviting the night in.
Tactical nuke incoming!
How's it going, everybody? This is Rob Novakast back with another video, and with this one, we're going to be discussing a video from K-9 Aversion, and something I need to mention right off the bat, especially when it comes to this. I'm not going to have you guys sit through 40 minutes of a video of me responding, going back and forth, responding to her video, because there's a lot. And if I can give a quick critique when it comes down to this individual's videos, is there are times where she is slow as molasses when it comes to talking and trying to get her points across. I mean, good lord. I was thinking about, responding, doing my usual responses and having her videos sped up, but there is just, even with that, somehow it's still very slow. So with that, I'm just going to go over some of the bullet points that have been made with this particular video, where she tries to make her point of culling dogs in society, and we'll see how far in logic this person wants to go. Now, something that I have to address as per usual, especially when it comes down to these particular videos. Myself, as well as the rest of Novakast, do not condone any form of harassment, cyberbullying, doxing, or anything else of the sort towards this individual or anybody else we talk about. So, first point is she, discusses a video that she previously made about evolution, which I'm not going to go into because, let's face it, we've debunked almost every single one of her videos, especially since even though she counts herself as a person who discusses human issues, she clearly, is very obsessive when it comes down to this whole quote-unquote dog-related issue. That, just more of an obsession of hers rather than an actual problem. But, anywho. Now, at some point, she then proceeds to discuss the culling in Australia, where a variety of different animals who were brought into Australia had to be culled, or in scenarios of culling, where that being animals like horses, camels, donkeys, etc. She then goes over what classifies as a quote-unquote pest animal, which that being preying on domestic or farm animals, damaging crops and food production, posing a threat to native animals and ecosystems, and being a nuisance and health hazard to people. Now, I'm sure with these, she tries to classify that, dogs, and more likely cats, are a pest animal, or classify as a pest animal, though not realizing that bottom line, especially with people, willing to take the risk when it comes down to owning a dog or cat, realize that they have their own set of, I want to say skills, but at the same time are a necessity when it comes down to society nowadays. The next point of discussion is, or at least when it comes to K-9 Aversion, is dingoes and their, inclusion when it comes down to Australia. She brings up the possible controversy of having dingoes around, although to a lot of people, dingoes are important, especially with them being the only native canid, as well as an apex predator to a lot of animals, so there's that. She goes into discussing measures of culling dingoes, that being shooting, poisoning, or trapping. She brings up how dingoes hunt other pest animals, which to an extent is important, especially with farmers, which is why there are some organizations like the Working Dingo Saving Life Foundation, where these organizations use dingoes, or at least try to push dingoes to cull certain animal populations. K-9 Aversion then, although triggered, brings up how Australians have, or at least some Australians have, dingoes as pets, and showcases a variety of people's pages that involve dingoes. Which, when it comes to scenarios like that, just my personal opinion, I always find it interesting when you have people who are able to an extent, domesticate certain animals that are considered as predators, because in some sense that kind of goes against the sort of argument that K-9 Aversion, as well as the rest of the dog hater or radical dog haters, try to bring up, is that they only go on their based instincts, when really there's more to these animals that they truly believe in, or more so understand. And let's face it, when it comes down to K-9 Aversion and the radical group that she follows or coordinates, it's clear that they refuse to understand, or at least try to have a second opinion when it comes to these animals. After the discussion of dingoes, she then segues into talking about dogs and the culling of dogs. And we've been talking about this for a little bit. For those who don't know what that is, that's kind of a selective extermination of the majority of a particular animal, in case people are wondering. I don't have the exact definition on hand, but it's more so like a controlled purge or controlled like removal of some of the animals that are present to reduce population. But anywho, she goes to talk about the culling of dogs. She claims that dog worshippers are against culling, and I think that's not the case, especially since a lot of people who are also not against dogs have been against culling, because a lot of people feel that it's unethical in some sense. She claims that stray dogs are pests, that they harass, intimidate, and attack people, which, let's face it, harassment is more, by definition, a human action, as well as more of intimidation. And in fact, the only reason that dogs will, let's say, quote-unquote, intimidate, is more so to protect themselves, especially with, like, stray dogs who feel cornered or helpless and would proceed to get into the defensive when it comes to somebody or another animal approaching them. K-9 Aversion then makes a statement that goes into dogs causing the most harm in rabies worldwide, which, sorry to correct you, if last time I checked, bats are the biggest source of rabies globally. So in some sense, you kind of wonder how dogs, especially, and you got to consider too, especially with certain areas around the world, areas that use trap, neuter, and release, or trap, neuter, and return, usually a lot of stray dogs inevitably end up getting inoculated with the rabies vaccine. And since usually when it comes down to these topics, K-9 Aversion showcases her videos, like continuously promoting herself, doesn't take into consideration too the fact that, with a variety of different countries, each country has a handle of it differently than others. So some areas that are more rural areas or third way countries will have probably more of a difficult time dealing with the rabies vaccine than countries like the US, etc. She then decides to make the argument about noise complaint about dogs causing anxiety and sleeplessness, which, I'm sorry, I hate to be mean, but when it comes down to, a variety of other, areas, I'm pretty sure people would, like, not to try to joke about it, but I'm sure people wouldn't mind barking compared to, gunfire or a variety of other things that happen when it comes down to noise. Because there are bigger problems than just dogs barking. Which, in some sense, kind of goes into my whole issue with her claiming that she's, for human issues, but yet continuously obsesses over this one particular thing as if it's the end-all be-all, when really it is not. And the variety of other reasons or issues that happen to humans. She goes further into talking about dogs destroying property or killing wildlife and causing animals to go extinct, and about over 200 animal species going extinct because of dogs, which is, I'm sorry, again, I think I've said this before, as much as saddening as it is for the, certain animals to go extinct, humans have done far worse. Considering since the 16th century, humans have caused 680 vertebrate species to go extinct. Heck, if anything, I'm pretty sure she'd probably be singing a different tune if she actually lived in some of the areas where there were mobs of people in violent protests, destroying buildings, destroying property, breaking into people's cars, stealing, looting, and a variety of other atrocities when it comes down to, our recent protests. Because, let's face it, when it comes down to, humanity, we'll find any reason to hate each other. That's the unfortunate fact. And I've said before, and I'll say it again, because since this person wants to claim that they're for human issues, we do far worse, humanity does far worse to each other than what dogs will do to us. So, yeah, this whole argument of, dogs being a, huge threat is a lot of bull. It really is. But continuing, K-9 Aversion then suggests that we start using culling tactics when it comes to dogs. In fact, she ends up using Egypt as an example and uses moral grandstanding to the cull dogs in Egypt, where the dying dogs, the dogs who aren't completely dead, are sometimes just thrown alongside a riverbed and left to die, to people who are attacked by dogs.
What the fuck?
Which, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure a lot of people are not going to be happy with her comparing, an attack, regardless of whether it was a dog or not, compared to, dogs who are killed, or at least dying, and left at a riverside to rot. Oh, and by the way, it gets better, ladies and gentlemen, because after this person hypocritically claims that, especially with people that report on issues on dogs, hypocritically claims that people that report the treatment on dogs only speak through emotion and not scientific fact. After this ridiculous statement, she then proceeds to discuss trap, neuter, and release. For those who don't know what trap, neuter, and release is, it's basically when a feral animal, like a dog or a cat, is captured, vaccinated, and neutered, and then released back into the wild, or at least in the general area where they were picked up. So that way, one, they can't and won't contract rabies, and two, they can't reproduce. So in some sense, especially when it comes down to the United States, it has been a method that they've been trying to implement instead of, mass culling, or like culling animals to reduce the population. So to some extent it works. Now I'm going to say flat out, it's not perfect, but it's better than the alternative, which is basically just mass killing of, a variety of different animals to reduce the population. But unfortunately, usually when it comes down to, discussing the dog topic, K-9 Aversion doesn't approve of this. Instead, she'd rather have us cull or quell the dog and cat populations. She brings up a book written by Hal Herzog and kind of makes a comparison of culling dogs and exterminating rats and mice. And here's the difference between that, because it's interesting that she tries to make a comparison with that. Whereas dogs, they actually have especially when it comes to countries like the US, they actually have a purpose. There's a variety of different reasons that a person will have a dog, not just as a pet, but when it comes down to security, or at least in some service animal, like occupations. I hate to use the word occupation, but in some sense when it comes to like job duties as a service animal. But anyways, you have that. Dogs have their use. So do cats, to some extent. Rats, on the other hand, especially when it comes down to like colonies of rats, they will produce disease, eat produce or a variety of different food in the household, and be quite the nuisance. Which is why when it comes down to culling rats and mice, to an extent, it's the reason we do it is because they are a actual nuisance, especially when they aren't, in some sense domesticated as certain pets are, and plus when they're not reproducing. So in some sense, dogs, they have their uses. Even though K-9 Aversion doesn't want to acknowledge this, dogs have their uses, as well as cats. Rats and mice, on the other hand, do not. So when it comes down to it, especially when it comes down to the culling of dogs, as K-9 Aversion more likely wants, as well as her ridiculous audience, at this point in time, when it comes to the US, they have a way of doing it, or at least a way with dealing with the situations of the population of both cats and dogs. That being trap, neuter, and release. Again, it's not perfect. I know K-9 Aversion, as well as the radical dog haters, want perfection when it comes to dealing with these animals, but here's the thing. Life isn't perfect. Nothing in this world is ever perfect. If that was the case, then we would have no crime. We'd have no issues whatsoever. We wouldn't have have to go to war with a variety of different countries. We wouldn't be hating each other for our skin color, our sexuality, our gender, what freaking what show we watch. If everything was perfect, there would be no issues. But unfortunately, especially for K-9 Aversion, there will always be issues, and there will be always a way to combat those issues. But K-9 Aversion, for whatever reason, doesn't want to handle the compromise, especially when it comes down to countries like the U.S. and I'm assuming Canada too. Systems like trap, neuter, and release actually work out. Now, and again, with other countries, it may not work so well, but at the same time, especially with countries like the U.S. and a variety of others, it works. And this point, I think the only reason she's promoting it is due to the fact that she'd rather just have all the dogs dead, as well as cats. But anyway, that's just my opinion on this. What are your thoughts? Love to hear what you guys have to say. If you guys can, please leave a like, comment, share, subscribe, all the good stuff. If you guys want to follow us on social media, links are in the description down below, as well as check out our daily content and the weekly podcast. With that being said, this is Novakast signing off. Have a good one, and take care. Peace.